let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We haven't
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Administrator Office Hours. I am your host, Andrew Sullivan, joined as always by my co-host, Mr. Johnny Rickard. Johnny, how are you today, sir?
Hey man, I'm hanging in there, trying to get over this like fake COVID thing that I've got going on.
Fake COVID. What? Here, let me turn on our names. I was looking at the names and realized that I can't see your name.
Yeah, I woke up one day, I thought I had COVID, and so I've taken a bunch of tests and everything. It comes up negative, but I just got this lingering pain that I can't get rid of, and it's annoying. It's not really pain.
I feel you. You and I've been, for like a month now. I've been complaining about this congestion that I've got. So I feel you. I blame the kids, right? They go to those petri dishes known as schools and come back with
absolute monsters.
I know. Well, it's good to be back on the bicycle again, right? We had an unexpected cancellation 2 weeks ago. So for anybody who was looking forward to our topic 2 weeks ago, which was OpenShift for Kubernetes administrators, we have rescheduled that probably to next week. I say probably because Johnny can't tell, but I'm looking at him in my interface because he's going to be running that one solo. So, because I'll be offsite, I'll be at the Red Hat Tower meeting with a whole bunch of IBM research folks. So, going to be an interesting day.
It'd be awesome.
So yeah, we'll I think I've said like 4 or 5 times now, I need to get that one staged, and I actually do need to get that one staged. I created the graphics and I did this thing and that. I haven't actually gotten it put into to Restream here, so that way it's ready. But so yeah, next week, blah blah blah. OpenShift for Kubernetes admins will be our topic. Man, it's like it is. It's like being on a bicycle.
It is.
Anyways, so last week we were off the air, which was a planned, vacation for us, and that was as a result of KubeCon. So I don't know if anybody heard, but KubeCon was a thing. Apparently, it happened. There was a lot of stuff there. So definitely, if you have an opportunity, go back. There was a number of blog posts that were put out by Red Hat, that were put out by IBM, that were put out by all kinds of people on all kinds of things talking about the stuff that happened there. OpenShift Commons happened the day before. It was a day 0 or a day -1 event. There was lots of really cool presentations there as well. There was one by, now I can't remember the name company, Informatica maybe, that I thought was interesting. So they are the first customer of the hosted advanced cluster security service. So they're using, I want to say, Amazon EKS and ACS together in order to provide security and all of the things that ACS does with whatever Kubernetes they choose, in this case, EKS. So I thought that was really awesome. And
that is awesome.
Really one of those testaments to, ACS, formerly StackRox, is now a part of Red Hat and a part of our portfolio, and it has an OpenShift, Red Hat OpenShift Advanced Cluster Security. But it's still a community thing, right? It's still able and still possible to do a lot of other things with it. So I thought that was really awesome.
Man, that is cool. It's exciting times, right?
Yeah, there's lots of stuff going on. It is, despite the fact that it is early November, right? Normally we're kind of spinning down, and everybody's getting ready for the holidays. One of the folks on my team the last 2 years, he has taken PTO from Thanksgiving through the New Year. Basically, doesn't take PTO any at all the rest of the year, and then it's basically 4.5 weeks of working time between those two holidays. Man, I wish I could take. I try to break my PTO up, right? You're supposed to use it to, take breaks and recharge and all that other stuff, but teach their own.
Yeah, exactly. That's a nice chunk of time off, though. That'd be hard to come back from. To be honest, like you almost need like another week of recovery time when you come back to work, right? Like a do not disturb week,
Yeah. Well, that's when you declare email bankruptcy, right? Where you just go in and Command A or Shift Control A and delete and
exactly. Well, I like that.
Yeah, your out of office message is thanks for your email, but please send it after such and such a date because I'm going to delete all of my emails that I've received over these 4 or 6 weeks.
That's right. If important, resend. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're definitely an email Joe. Like just I took I think Friday off last week, and just in that little bit of time from like late Thursday afternoon that I didn't check my mail until Monday morning, I was like, oh my god, it's already overwhelming. Then
Yeah.
I'm an inbox zero kind of guy. Like I have to, like I get anxiety if it's not zero. So it's like start kind of freaking out.
Do you like actually see the inbox, or is it just red? Like everything has to be red?
Oh, everything has to be read. Yeah, I can't get rid of stuff either. I'm an email hoarder as well.
Yeah,
So
I'm the same way. Like I'm sitting here, I just glanced down at my bar here, and I have 3 unread emails, which means that for me, if it's unread, it's an action item. It means I need to do
yeah,
something with it. So I won't say it gives me anxiety until it gets above 10, and then it starts getting I start getting twitchy.
exactly. Yeah, can't sleep at night. You're like kind of thinking about it. It's bad. It's bad.
So yeah, and then all of the chats. There's so many chats: Google
Oh
chat,
yeah.
Slack chat, iMessage, and just on and on and on. I've managed to avoid IRC. Fortunately, for better or for worse, I guess. I have avoided IRC here in Red Hat, which still has a strong community. A lot of the engineering folks still use IRC, which I think is really
Yep.
interesting. All right. So we've bantered here longer than we normally do. So first of all, thank you for your patience. Really appreciate that. And I want to welcome Harriet Lawrence to the stream today. So our topic for today is one that is near and dear to my heart, and I hope that Christian is out there listening somewhere, because we'll be talking about GitOps for admins. And this is something that, for anybody who's watched the stream, we're 80 something stream, 88 according to the thing in my window here, 88 episodes in. And I think since the very beginning, we've talked about the concept of GitOps and, managing applications and managing configuration in a controllable way and all of that other stuff. And usually when we talk about it and when we think about, when you think about Red Hat live streaming, there is GitOps Guide to the Galaxy, right? We have an entire stream dedicated to this. It's usually focused on the application side. And I really liked, Harriet reached out a few weeks ago and said, hey, let's do a stream. And I said, yes, please. I want to reset. I want to go back to kind of base zero. And, Andrew, as I've said before we started here, I'm going to play the role that I was born to play, dumb guy. And like, how, what is GitOps? How does it help us? What are some things that we can do as administrators to take advantage of that tool? So that's really the conversation for today. All right, I'll stop now. Harriet, if you would please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Hi, everyone. I'm Harriet. I'm the PM for OpenShift GitOps at Red Hat. I'm relatively new to Red Hat, given how long a tenured many people are here. I just joined in February this year.
Yeah.
So thanks. Very excited to be doing GitOps things and always take every opportunity to chat about GitOps with people.
Yeah. So not to put you on the spot, how's Red Hat 9 months in?
Wonderful. Yes, it's brilliant. I actually interned with Red Hat about 10 years ago, when I was still living in Australia. So interned in the Brisbane office as a technical writer. And that was before I went off and did development stuff, and eventually found my way through to product management and back to Red Hat. And it's wonderful.
That's awesome.
Do we get to call you a boomerang?
Right? I don't think it actually counts.
And no, that wasn't an Australia joke, by the way. That's usually what we that is literally what we call folks who leave and come back. So
would have been a good combo Australia joke, but also returning to Red Hat joke.
Yeah, that's a good pun.
Yeah. I'd say I'm full of puns, but not today. So yeah, welcome back. And I know. Let's see, how long have I been here? I've been here a little over 4 years now. So 9 months in, I was still trying to figure out which way was up. And Red Hat can be, as we were just saying, like emails. It can be overwhelming sometimes. It can be a bit of a fire hose. And I have a new person on my team who's been with Red Hat now for about 6 weeks, and we were having a one-on-one the other day. He's like, I get all of these meeting invites and I don't know which ones I should or shouldn't go to. He's like, I'm just accepting all of them and I'll figure it out. I'm like, yep, that's well,
Oh,
welcome
you
to
gotta do it.
the jungle, right?
Yep. Yeah, you don't want to have a look at my email inbox. It's a bad time for you inbox zero people.
Yeah.
Johnny, who was it
Struggle.
that we had on the stream that had like 10,000 emails? I don't remember.
Oh,
There
I
was-
don't know, but yeah. Yeah.
Mine's not that
Start
bad.
kind of like.
Yeah. Some people, it's just, I let it run rampant and it does what it does.
Wow.
Not me.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Harriet. Really happy that you're here and looking forward to the conversation. So before we get to that, let's talk some top of mind things. We've already really talked about KubeCon. Again, if you didn't see any of the KubeCon stuff, cloud.redhat.com/blog. There's a number of blog posts from all the Red Hat folks that were there. You can also go to the KubeCon's website, and if you have a login there, you can log in. You can just search, like literally search for Red Hat, and it'll pull up all of the folks who work for Red Hat who had sessions, right? So I think I want to say it was like 60 or 80 different sessions that Red Hat folks participated in. It was a huge number, which is and most of it's KubeCon. If you've never been to a KubeCon before, it's not really vendor centric, it's community, right? It's all the upstream stuff. So to me, that's really a testament of just how much upstream, community and project involvement that Red Hat has, that we have all of these people. We don't go and give here's why you should choose Red Hat OpenShift session at KubeCon. Instead, it's here's some of the really cool stuff that Kubernetes is doing. And then maybe it's here's how OpenShift is taking advantage of that, or how OpenShift is contributing it back, and that type of stuff. I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I like that. It's same thing at the open source summit too. I mean, like it's awesome to see the impact that Red Hat has across the community, but also how much we appreciate the community too, right? And I think that's to your point, right, about what KubeCon is. We get to see what the community is doing, and we get to appreciate the value that they're providing, and it's awesome. It really is.
Yeah, which I should point out. So somebody in the Kubernetes Slack channel, I was watching a thread, and they were saying that they had submitted a PR against one of the things. I want to say OC, the OpenShift command line tool, and it never heard anything. Basically, it went stale and then got auto closed by the bot. So Christian actually, and again, I don't know if he's watching, but Christian poked me about it, and then he and I went and asked the product management team. Harriet, you might remember seeing that thread in Slack.
I do.
And what we discerned was that effectively some of the people who were listed as maintainers for some of the repos was out of date. So I think they kicked off an initiative to update those and make sure that all of that gets addressed. So if you're one of those community folks, if you have submitted something, if you're interested in contributing, and the OpenShift GitHub, hopefully all of that's fixed now. So if you don't hear anything, if you don't see anything, let us know. Feel free to reach out and poke us, and we're happy to find the appropriate people and see if we can get some attention on those things, because it is the core, the essence of Red Hat is open source and community and all that. So it's a sad day when that isn't reflected publicly. Let's see, what else have we got in here, Johnny? Looking at our list of things here. Red Hat Device Edge. Yeah,
so they we're Red Hat, so names are hard, and so it looks like MicroShift, has been rebranded as Red Hat Device Edge. And so I'm going to post the link to the blog, but the blog is just the official announcement that Red Hat Device Edge is now MicroShift. So this is going to be a thing pretty soon, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, this is one that's interesting to me, right? Because we talked about MicroShift a couple of times. We had the MicroShift team on. We've had who was it? Diego and Henri came on, or maybe it was Luis. I don't remember. They came and showed MicroShift actually being used and all that other stuff. So to me, the big thing that came out of this announcement is that it's a real product, or it's very soon going to be a real product, right? It went from this side project science experiment that engineering did into now it's a valid and real part of our edge strategy. So yeah, I'm learning more and more. I'm becoming a what did we call it, Johnny? A 15-minute expert on the Red Hat device or the Red Hat Edge stuff. As a result,
right.
Some of the other work that I've got going on. So
the new hotness.
Yeah, so definitely check out the blog post. Again, it's MicroShift, just the productized name of it and all that. And again, looking forward to great things happening there, including I know ACM is doing some work to improve scalability and all that other stuff to help manage a bunch of larger numbers of clusters. I think the last one I saw was something like 2,000 single node OpenShift instances managed
Mhm.
through a single ACM. So if we're talking device edge and all that other stuff, how do we continue to manage that?
Yeah, exciting times. I keep saying it, we are in like exciting times right now with everything, ACM, and then we had Adele on a couple weeks ago with the hosted control plane,
Yeah.
Kita, all these things that are coming out, OpenShift GitOps, the advancements that we're making with that, and some of the things that are coming out with that, which Harriet's going to talk about. There's all this exciting stuff that's happening, and we're right in the middle of it, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. I finally had time to get hands on with HyperShift or hosted control planes. It is embarrassingly easy.
That's
It really is. It's you deploy a cluster, you deploy ACM, you add a credential object through ACM, and then basically it's one CRD, right? You create a new HyperShift or a deployment object, and it deploys everything that you need and stands up a whole cluster. Like it is painfully easy. Like I kept expecting it to be harder, and it wasn't.
yeah. Like, where's the catch? It's gonna get me. It's gonna get me.
Yeah. So, all right. So, let's see. We weren't going to talk about that. So, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes talking about kubectx. So, we've been asked a couple of times here on the stream about how we manage multiple clusters, multiple contexts. So, I actually have this issue currently. So, I'm setting up and administering multiple clusters for a series of demos that we'll be doing here in a couple of weeks. And so I have this need to switch between a bunch of different clusters. So I spent some time on this, and there's been some internal questions, internal things around this as well. And one of the things that Andy Block, who has been on the stream before, he was on one of the early streams back in the teens or 20s talking about Quay. He recommended kubectx. So let me share my screen here real quick. So what this does is it gives us the ability to do a kubectx, right? It gives me this option to select which context I want to use for my clusters based off of whatever kube config it happens to be pointed at. So this is my default one, and most of these clusters are not real clusters. They're all old clusters. It's just for examples. But it basically, I type kubectx. It gives me this selectable menu of which one of these clusters do you actually want to point at, and if this is a real cluster. Nope, it is not. So it would immediately switch context to that. So I can do kubectx again, and I can choose like this one. This is also not a real cluster, or no longer a real cluster, I should say. But my point here is that it gives us this really neat ability to, right, I'm not going to wait on you, to manage our clusters. Do an export kube config. Type and talk at the same time. If I look at this guy, this one actually has multiple different clusters in here.
Hey, Andrew, can you zoom in a little bit?
Hopefully that makes it more readable.
Yeah, it looks a little bit better on YouTube.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I switched my context to my primary hub. You can see here I've got like 129, 122, and 180.230. I can do kubectx. This time I'm going to do backup hub admin because that's one of the other contexts that I have. Now I can do the same OC get node. You can see just like that, I switched over to a different cluster, right? I've got different set of nodes that are running inside of here, different set of things that are going on. So I thought that was really cool. So how did I create? How did I actually ingest all of these contexts? So what I have, if I go to, so if I do find, did that in the wrong order, didn't I? So essentially here I have 4 kubeconfig files. And what I did initially is I did kubeconfig equals, and then I take each one of these and I separate them with a colon. What I'm doing is taking all 4 of them, primary dev, primary hub, yep. So now if I do an echo config, I've got all 4 of those there. If I do a kubectl config view, you can see it prints off all of these different things that are in each one of my kube configs, right? But you'll notice, for example, there's only one user down here, admin. That's because in each one of these kube config files, it defines a cluster. You can see here's the cluster name, but they all have the same username. So if I wanted to do this correctly, I would need to go in and I would need to modify each one of these to have a unique username instead of all of them using the name admin. And then I should have 4 admin users. But anyway, so if I were to do that, then what I do is that same kubectl config view -- flatten, and I output that to s.kubeconfig. Now I have a single kubeconfig file that has all of those in there. And now I can simply point my config variable to that .kubeconfig and do kubectx. And you see it pops up again with those same, my set of options that are available there. So really simple way I've been looking for and I haven't found yet in my cursory searching of, how can I integrate that into my bash prompt? I would love to find a way to have, so that way when I set a context, it tells me which cluster I'm connected to as a part of my command prompt. So if anybody knows of anything, that would be great. But yeah, other than that, I don't think I have any of those clusters open here. Other than that, if I'm looking at the console, I always put in a banner, so that way I know which cluster I'm looking at. But from the command line, this is the way that I tend to use it. And I'll dig up the link for kubectx and I'll post that into the chat here. Super helpful tool.
That's awesome.
All right, that's all I got. Pure line from Christian. I'll have to look at that one, Christian. Christian, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I don't think I've heard of Pureline or kubectx because I was always wondering how, especially on the Kubernetes side, how you did that, right? Like I guess even on the OpenShift side, I guess normally I'm managing a single cluster at a time, so it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, that's kind of cool. It's cool that they have tools like that.
Yeah, and I know there's a whole bunch of them. This was just happens to be the one that I stumbled upon first as a recommendation, and I find it to be very convenient. But yeah, whatever floats your boat, Christian. Pureline. All right, I will stop my screen share here, so that way we can get to the topic du jour. So GitOps. So GitOps is, and Harriet, please correct me at any point in time. GitOps is a feature / product. I don't think it's a product. We don't have a SKU for it. So it's a feature of OpenShift that is really sort of an umbrella term, right? It encompasses Argo CD and some other things in order to deliver a GitOps capability into OpenShift. So if you don't mind, as I said before, like, can you give me the dumb guy 101 or is there a less than a 101, the 001 version of what is OpenShift GitOps and like what is the problem it solves?
Have some water before I get into it. Yeah, absolutely. So OpenShift GitOps is pretty much just upstream Argo CD. So I'll go into all of those words. GitOps is a workflow the same kind of like idea that DevOps is. So GitOps kind of evolved out of DevOps, and it's a way of doing things that uses Git as a single source of truth for your environments, your deployments, your infrastructure, just Git as a single source of truth. And there are 4 kind of key principles. I think they get called core GitOps principles. And these were defined by the GitOps working group, I think last year. And they kind of give you an idea of what the kind of constraints are for saying like, I do things in the GitOps way. None of them like say like, oh, it's Argo CD or it's Flux or it's a particular product. It's just like the general overview. So the first one is that like your system is described declaratively. So you've written down somewhere, and usually in YAML, what your system should look like. And that can be an application that has access controls, or more relevant to the viewers of this stream, it's cluster configuration or infrastructure. So that's your first one. Secondly, we want this state, this desired state, to be versioned and immutable. So you want your YAML stored somewhere that is central and accessible and is a single source of truth for the rest of your system. You usually get that from using something like Git, but any system that complies with versioned and immutable can be your source of truth. The third one is that you want any changes that you make to be approved and then go and apply automatically. So usually that approval process happens via a pull request if you're using Git as your source of truth. And you'd make a pull request to your configuration repo. Generally speaking, folks like to keep their config separate to their applications. It kind of gives you the freedom to have a different team manage it, like a platform team or DevOps team, whatever people are calling it these days. And you can set access controls around that and approval request flows and that kind of stuff that is different to your development stuff. Mm-hmm. So you've done some kind of approval process, and when your changes merge in Git, you can roll them out automatically. So not only does the GitOps workflow pull the stuff out of Git, it will poll it at regular intervals to check for changes, which leads into the last one, the last principle, which is having a controller that monitors your repo and polls for changes. So this controller will go and detect drift between the desired state that you've defined in your repo and what is the actual state of your system. And it can act on that drift. So it could be bringing it back into sync automatically, or it could be notifying you, hey, there's been a discrepancy. You need to act on this.
So
that is like the general.
Yeah, and I want to touch on a couple of things, because I think in particular the first one that you said there, right? So the system is described declaratively. That's not unique to Argo or GitOps, right? That principle has been around for a long time. Whether it's Ansible, whether it's Puppet, Chef, there's a number of different tools that we have used over the years to effectively accomplish that principle for configuring our systems. I think what's different here is something that I think a lot of us have either chosen to implement separately, or we have this pipe dream of implementing it separately, and that is using Git or something, some sort of revision control, source control system to manage that configuration so that we can see over time what's changed. And with GitOps, it's now a core requirement. Like, you have no option other than you're going to use Git, you're going to use this so that you can see precisely what's happened, when, who approved it, and all of that other stuff, which I think is not a bad thing, as someone who spent a lot of years as an administrator wondering who changed what.
Yep.
So I think that that's a really good thing. And then I really liked the latter two parts, which is, approved changes are applied automatically. There's no, and yes, you can solve this a number of different ways using tools like Ansible, right? Ansible automation platform, can have things, jobs that periodically execute to reapply configuration. Last week or 2 weeks ago at Ansible Fest, they talked about event-driven, Ansible, where now you can kick off Ansible playbooks, Ansible tasks based off of something triggering that to happen, a webhook, for example. So, there's ways to do that, but here it's native and it's a core component, a core aspect of the implementation.
Yeah, totally. And I don't think any of these things are new. And I don't think even GitOps itself is new. I think people have been using these workflows for ages. They just haven't been talking about it as GitOps. And having that framework to talk about it and try it out has made it more accessible to large parts of our industry.
Exactly, and putting the rules around it, right? Like the four whatever they are, the four declarations around like what GitOps is. I think that helps kind of like box it in, and kind of like, all right, thou shalt do these things to make sure that you're following this frame. Otherwise it'll sprawl, right? Because you give any nerd an inch, right? We're going to take it and we're going to take that and more, and we're going to try and add our own little special sauce to it. So I think that having the framework with it, and then just having the tool that can go out and reconcile things, kind of like everybody used to hate on Puppet, and Andrew just brought this up, right? Everybody used to hate on Puppet, but at the end of the day, right, Puppet was pretty rad because it would go out, and if you had made a modification to something that was being monitored, it would change it back. And I think that's powerful, right? Especially when you talk about configuration drift and keeping your clusters in sync. When you start managing multiple clusters or hundreds of clusters, like, you need something like this.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess GitOps solves the problem, if you will, or in a Kubernetes native way, it addresses the problem of declarative configuration. And I want to be clear that a lot of folks also refer to Kubernetes itself as a declarative configuration system, right? The YAML objects that you apply, you're declaring to the control plane you want it to look that way. But GitOps applies that to an application, if you will, right? Not a single object. So now you can define this application, and I think the literal term is application set in the GitOps CRD, right, or the Argo CRD. So you define this thing as a set of objects that need to be managed, that need to have that revision control, that configuration management against them, as opposed to individuals. So I guess my question, where I'm eventually rambling here too, is, so what does that unit of control look like? If I want to, as an administrator, be able to apply specific machine configs, or if I want to make sure that machine sets, this machine set exists with this particular scale. So I think these are important things. Going back to the whole point of, what was it, the third one, sorry, I'm looking at the thing, right? Approved changes, right, can be applied automatically. Hey, we need to scale this cluster up from 2 nodes to 10 nodes. Well, that has cost associated with it. You want to know who approved that, because if we're talking physical servers, that could be tens of thousands of dollars in new physical servers that you've just commandeered and put associated with your cluster. So I guess, what does that look like? What is that management? How is that applied for these things?
Yeah, so you mentioned application sets. That is a kind of newer concept in Argo CD. It's like, so the smallest one is an application. You make an application CR, and an application set is a way of saying, like, you're using a generator, you're saying, hey, I want this one application, but I want like 6 replicas, or I want it in these different environments, or you're getting it, you're like templating out your applications and pushing them out where you need them. So applications is a very overloaded word inside of Argo CD and GitOps, but that's the kind of unit that we generally talk about.
And something to key in on there, you mentioned the generators, right? So with an application, you generally define, or you declare your repo, the path, the cluster, all those things, right? And it's kind of like in that single application resource. with an application set, you define this generator, and there's a bunch of them. I think there's 6 or 7 of them. The one that I have experience with is the Git generator, and you essentially say, hey, in my repo, go look in that directory, and then it'll just pull in all of those in any directory that you have in there. So if you have Helm charts or whatever that are sitting in that directory, it'll pull all of them in, and then it'll create the individual application resources for them and then roll them out. So there's a lot of power as far as like being able to like dynamically generate some of these declarative things, right? Where I can just say, hey, go look there, and then deploy these things and manage them for me after that. Like that's one way. And then the other one I think that's pretty popular is list generator, and that's where it's literally like you're creating an application, right? You define, the different components of that application, and then you just let Argo do its thing and roll them out, and it'll create the individual application objects. So it's pretty cool. Like there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do, and having the visual aid along with it, the green, yellow, red type thing. Mm-hmm. I think that's big for teams that don't have a lot of experience with Kubernetes and application deployments and infrastructure deployments and stuff like that. So it's pretty rad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love the DR aspect of keeping everything in a single source of truth as well. Like if you're defining not just like your application deployments, if you've got all your code, all your like infrastructure and everything there, your cluster goes down, no worries, Argo bring you up a new one. Everything goes down, you've got it all defined. You just like kick it off and off it goes and recreates everything for you.
Yeah, you're talking one of my favorite topics to touch on with regard to all of that, Harriet. Disaster recovery is not, you don't just turn the nodes back on at the new location, right? You have to be cognizant of having all of that, your application, all of the config, all of the things associated with it defined in a system like Argo and GitOps, hugely beneficial. So Johnny, I'm gonna toss you under the bus. I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask if you have an environment available so we can look at a few things. And then Harriet, I don't know if you know the answer to Irfan's, and apologies for butchering anybody's name, question here. Why don't we have the GitOps operator available in the developer sandbox?
We are looking at it actually. Keep your eyes peeled.
So
sorry, it's
heard
not
it
there
first.
yet.
Heard it here first.
Hurry up and wait is all I'm hearing. Yeah.
And we had a question earlier from William about let me see if I can find it, about using multiple repos for the deployments. So right now, if you deploy an application, you can essentially have a single source of for your repo, and he's was wondering when that capability for multi repos is going to be available.
Oh,
or multi-sources.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's like fairly imminent. While you're bringing up the environment, I will just I'll go look it up in Jira and give you straight from the horse's mouth.
All right, and I will do this. All right, awesome. So this is a OpenShift GitOps interface.
Sorry to interrupt you, Johnny. You might want to stretch that out a little to be rectangular instead of square.
My bad. Let me know if that's. Is that more better?
Yeah, that looks good.
That looks good.
Maybe a little small now.
No.
You made it too rectangular.
Very specific requirements, yeah.
It's a fine line to walk.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Good. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is OpenShift GitOps, and so what I've done is I'm on my team, the Validated Patterns. We deploy multiple Red Hat products together, integrated together, using the GitOps framework. So all the things that Harriet was talking about, the 4 principles of GitOps, the pillars, that's what they're, the 4 pillars of GitOps. We abide by that in our framework, and so I've just deployed an OpenShift 4.11 cluster, and on top of that, we use a Argo of Argo kind of model. So we have a single Argo that manages another Argo. So we have a cluster level. And what that does is it manages all of the cluster level resources. So, I mean, literally like anything that you would need like a cluster admin type thing for, that's what that Argo does. And then we have a hub Argo CD that deploys the actual application resources. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the cluster level, because when we define and declare our applications, we have the cluster Argo CD actually defining the application. And it kind of gives us this app of apps model. And I'll try and find the link for app of apps and put it in the chat. And then thank you, Harriet. So Harriet says looking at next year for the Helm charts from other repos. So early 23. Okay, awesome. But if we take a look at the Argo CD UI, and I'm going to kind of pop out of here a little bit, so because there's a lot going on, so we can hopefully see. So we have this application here called the multi-cloud GitOps application, and what this is this is essentially our meta app, and then it's going to deploy some of these other applications. So it's deploying the Argo CD resource. There's some deployments and stuff like that in here. And then pretty soon I'm going to be able to scroll and find the other applications. But you can see like all the resources that get spun up and created. Obviously, sync and sync OK is good. Sometimes you'll see things like degraded and sync OK, which just means that the sync from the Git repo is good to go. So that reconciliation between what's in Git and what's on the cluster is good. But it might be degraded because maybe the resource didn't deploy correctly. So maybe there was a misconfiguration somewhere. So that's just some of the things that you'll see. And I'm just gonna, so, here we go. So as part of this deployment, we deploy ACM. So you can see we have our ACM application, and then we have an application here that a guy on my team named Marty, he wrote. And then we integrate with external secrets and HashiCorp Vault for our secrets management. So you can just see like we've got our top level applications, and in the definition, we're just saying, hey, look, I need this app declared. Here's all my parameters that I want with it. It's going to this GitHub URL. Here's the path within my Git repo where I can find this application resource, or where I can find the contents for this application. And so then and I'm sorry for jumping around here, but like, just imagine that this is all one Argo. So it deploys this application, and what we can see now is we have another application here for ACM and all the resources that are associated with ACM. So you can see like you get this really nice visual representation of your application and what it looks like on the cluster. And if any one of these was out of sync or had an issue or anything like that, then you would see it'd either be like a yellow shield or the broken heart, which is my favorite. It's kind of funny, or the green check because everything's good to go here.
So Johnny, each one of those blocks in that diagram, does that represent a YAML object in Kubernetes?
Yep, it does. And so, but the thing about this is that I did not declare each one of these objects, right? So as you know, like with an operator, when you deploy an operator, that operator will deploy whatever, right? Config map, secrets, deployments, etc. So the things that I will generally deploy with our framework is I'll create a subscription. I'll create, if there's an operator group required or deployment or whatever for an application, I'll provide that. But then if an operator needs to go out and deploy some things like the endpoint for the service or the service itself on a route, then it'll take care of all of that, and then you'll just see those reflected within your Argo CD UI.
So I have a question, and I don't know Harriet or Johnny or maybe one of the other folks I know from the GitOps team that's watching. I think there's some overlap between GitOps and kind of the way that we talk about or present operators, and even things like Helm charts. So because I can deploy an application, right? I use a Helm repo. I go and I say Helm deploy, and it instantiates my application, and it manages a lot of those different components and stuff like that. So do you have any thoughts, suggestions around like comparing those different ways of deploying applications, maybe pros, cons, strengths, weaknesses type of scenarios?
Should we go, Harry? I can go on this one.
Yeah, you go. I need to have a bit of an existential crisis over these differences.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I keep saying applications, but I use that as a blanket term to mean like really any configuration in the cluster, right? I know we keep saying that because that's literally the language that's used inside of Argo to define, as you pointed out, Harriet, to define the managed object. But you can apply it with hey, I want to make sure that this machine set or this machine config parameter or a object exists, and like that type of stuff.
Yeah, so this is like the GNOME versus KDE, right? This is like the It's very opinionated because there's people like Gerald and Christian around here, and they're both big fans of customized. Where our team we're very heavy Helm focused, but so you can use Helm. I like Helm because I'm very familiar with Ansible, and so Helm templating is it's not the same, but it uses a lot of the same kind of like structure. So to me, it's more familiar. Where customized, in my opinion, like you have your bases and then you have your overlays and stuff like that. So it seems like in some cases there's a lot of duplication. I think that there's things that customized makes very easy, where Helm is a little bit more difficult. And then the way that Argo utilizes Helm makes using Helm a little it makes it just a bit off from like a normal Helm install on a chart, right? Because what Argo does is it essentially renders the template and then does a kubectl apply. And so things like lookups and things that you would normally use in a Helm chart to go and get information, you can't necessarily do out of the box with Argo and Helm templates. So that's where I think like things like customized kind of solve that problem a little bit. But the other way is kind of like how we did it back in the day, Andrew. You remember you build something, it worked. You do a OC get -o YAML, carrot that to a .yaml file, and then you just reuse that same config. As long as Argo CD or OpenShift GitOps knows that path is there, and then that resource is sitting in that path, it doesn't have to be a Helm template. It doesn't have to be a customized chart or anything like that. It could just be a YAML file that's sitting in there that's already completed. So it's kind of like pick your poison. Me personally, I'm all about reusability. So if I can take a chart and I can put it out in say maybe a public chart repo and then be able to pull that down and then reuse it, I'm 100% going to be all about that life, because I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, totally. And we are looking at ways to get around the shortcomings of the decision upstream to use Helm template, and seeing if we can figure out a way in the OpenShift GitOps operator to make the kind of dynamic value lookup available to folks using Helm or folks not using Helm. We haven't got an answer yet, but we're figuring things out. We're trying out a few different approaches, and we'll keep trying until we have a good answer for everyone.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that feature. I think that it's just going to make it even better. Argo is an awesome tool right now, and I think that's just going to make it even better.
Me too.
So
it'll be great.
One thing, so we have this application here, and it's called config demo. And again, it's a simple application. It's a deployment. And so what we do is we declare, the way that we do our framework is we essentially declare what applications we want. So we create a values file, and we say, hey, I want config demo deployed in this namespace. Here's within my repo where it's at. And what happens is Argo CD will pick this up, and it says, oh, hey, look, I'm supposed to deploy this application that's not on the cluster yet, so let me do this reconciliation, and it'll roll it out to the cluster, right? So in Argo CD, this is what it looks like. It says, hey, here's your map of here's your topology of your application. But if we jump over to OpenShift and we kind of take a look, let me go, this might be a little bit easier. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. What'd I do, Andrew? Local cluster, developer, there we go.
I think that also brings up an extension to my previous question, which is how ACM fits in. Because I think there are some, you used the word opinions before, and I think that's the right word of, how do you manage applications? How do you distribute, these things across multiple clusters, multiple instances? Do you use ACM as the primary, control point? Do you use, GitOps or GitOps managing GitOps, or ACM managing GitOps, or there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I don't think there's a wrong answer necessarily. It's very opinionated, but it is interesting to see that there is all of these tools that, at least at the surface, appear to have some overlap.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely works with ACM very nicely. And as always, and Christian and I both love to say, it depends. It depends on your setup, depends on your team, your organization, your access control requirements, who needs to do the administering, who needs to use the things, on how you would use them all together.
Yeah, and it's so funny that so many questions are answered that way with Kubernetes. So somebody asked yesterday in one of the chat rooms, like, "Oh, how do I do capacity forecasting with OpenShift?" Well, what's your application like? What's the application doing? Well, we don't know what the application is. Well, it's going to be hard. there's some things you can do, like monitoring can do so much, but at the same time, if the app, you have to work with the application team, you have to understand that, oh yeah, we're going to substitute, database A for database B, and oh yeah, database B has a much heavier resource footprint. Well, if you don't know about that ahead of time, then it's what's the thing about like if you're gosh, now I can't remember the analogy. Anyways, I'm not going to belabor it since I forgot. But yeah, anyway, sorry to interrupt you, Johnny.
No, you're fine. You're fine. The one thing that I like about ACM and GitOps together, right, is they're both very like oh, now I can't think of the word. I just had a like complete flat line.
Complementary.
But complementary. Yeah, thank you. And because ACM has that GitOps component, right? It has that aspect where it can roll things out, and then obviously you have OpenShift GitOps. And I think that the way that when you use them together, so what we do on our team is we'll roll out an OpenShift GitOps, and then we'll roll out an ACM, and then when we start talking about like multiple clusters, right? We'll roll out ACM policies, and then that policy will push out like that initial OpenShift GitOps instance on that remote cluster or that hub spoke cluster, and then essentially what will happen is it essentially it does all the construction work, right? Like it goes down, it digs up the roads, it lays down the asphalt, and then it says, hey, I'm done, I'm ready to go. And then what happens is the applications start getting deployed. And it's just a nice complementary toolkit that you can have, and it's powerful because back to Hillary's point earlier about the single source of truth. Now it's like, okay, I have a cluster go down. Okay, well, let me use GitOps to spin up a new cluster through ACM, and then have ACM lay down some of that construction zone stuff, and then have Argo come in behind it and lay down the rest of the environment. And so now you start talking about these rolling environments that you can kind of spin up and spin down pretty quickly, and you've got a lot of flexibility and a lot of power at your hands right now. And the concern of like, oh man, I just had this node go down in the middle of the night, or this zone went down in the middle of the night. It's like, okay, well, just go ahead, just run this command, and you should be good to go.
Yeah.
Yep. And ACM's even using GitOps behind the scenes as well. Like you can create Argo CD application sets directly from ACM.
Yeah.
And I believe that is the future that they're moving towards, is application sets instead of subscriptions. So they work beautifully together. And especially if you're running multiple Argo CDs, getting that overview, that like single pane of glass overview of like what is everything that I've got is fantastic in ACM, whereas you'd have to like hop into the different Argo CDs one at a time if you wanted to manage them individually.
Exactly, and good point, right? With Argos or with ACM, you get that governance, right? So that observability across all the clusters, and then you get that governance and insight into like, okay, I've got these applications deployed to this cluster. I've got it's just, yeah, it's man. It's just powerful, and it's awesome. And just the strides, I mean, on the OpenShift GitOps side too, and ACM, like the strides that they've made as far as capability and getting stuff out, like it's incredible.
And we want to do more, the teams together. We work closely together with the ACM team, and we're trying to make sure that the stuff that we're coming up with will marry nicely between the two products and create more useful things for everyone.
Well, I think the way I interpret it is the same way that we talk about, the differences between what ACM does with managing security policies and configuration versus what ACS does versus what like the compliance operator does, right? And that they all three have a role to play. They just do it at different levels and in different places. So, ACM, deploys Argo or OpenShift GitOps, and then applies, or adds all of the applications inside of there, and then relies on that cluster specific Argo instance to then deploy and manage those inside of there. Or you could, conversely, depending on your opinion and your perspective and what you feel most comfortable with and meets, checks the most boxes for you, you have an Argo of Argos, right? Type of thing. It's both a curse and a blessing, right? To have a plethora of options.
It just does too many things.
You skipped the tour, Johnny. How dare you?
Oh, so I'm sorry. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of like behind the scenes. I stood up another cluster when we first started, because I think some of the value that you can see is like, just talking about some of the policies. So we can see I have 2 violations, right? So I've added this cluster. I've created some policies, ACM policies, right? And so it's just a little bit slow, but we're getting a live view as things are starting to be applied to this remote cluster, right? So I've added in the spoke cluster using ACM, and then we're going to start seeing some of these extra. Let me go back to this view. The networking. Oh, excuse me, operators. So what's going on is ACM installed the OpenShift GitOps operator on my spoke cluster. And so what's going on now is as OpenShift GitOps is getting deployed on the spoke, it's going to pick up its initial meta application, right? So like that cluster application, right? And so that way we'll get this app of apps, and we always use the Argo of Argos, right? So we have a control Argo and then a deploy Argo essentially. And what that does is we're going to kind of get this like nice little management layer, but then we'll get this meta application, then we'll get app of apps. And so we have this app of apps kind of framework and path all the way through our remote clusters. And so as we start seeing some of these operators get deployed, we'll also start seeing that config demo application that we are just kind of looking at get deployed out to the remote cluster. And we should start seeing some updates. Yeah, here we go. So pretty soon we'll start seeing the console updates, and then that's it. And just so you know, like all I did to get this ready is I deployed the cluster and I ran make install, and it just deploys Argo CD and ACM and those subscriptions, and then lets the application resources itself from Argo deploy all the other stuff. So all of this goodness in here and then over in here.
Let me
this was
rewind you
all
a bit,
done.
Johnny.
What's that?
Let me rewind you a bit, Johnny. The make install. That's that's a validated patterns thing. I mean, it's a developer thing, but you're using,
yes.
So I don't know if you
team,
want to
we
touch
use
on
make
that.
install. Yeah, so the way that we provision a pattern right now is we run, you pull the repo down and then you run make install, especially with this multi-cloud GitOps deployment. And what that does is that does the initialization of the pattern. So our framework uses OpenShift GitOps for everything, and it doesn't have to have ACM. It's not a hard requirement, but say if you wanted ACM to manage multiple clusters, we can do that. But if you're a customer that doesn't have ACM and you only want to use OpenShift GitOps, then we also have that ability as well. So that way you can kind of scrape out the ACM aspect of it and just do the Argo of Argo type deployments. And I think that's really where like an application set with your generators and stuff like that, that would really become like a powerful tool in that regard. But yeah, just to say, like when I say make install, like I didn't change anything. I didn't update any file. I literally cloned the repo down. I deployed the cluster. I exported my kube config and I ran make install to kick this off. And it's literally just doing like a Helm install on this application, and then this application is the meta, and it deploys all the other things. And so it's just like this nice rollout after that. It's cascading is a word for deletion and stuff like that here, but like it has this nice cascading effect where it just kind of it rolls everything, sound effects and all. You actually get the drum roll and everything. It's pretty cool.
So we've got about 15 minutes left. So for the audience, please, any questions that you have, go ahead and send those in. We'll do our best. We'll answer all the questions that we can. And if we don't know the answer, then we'll go and we'll find the answer because that's what we're here for. I'm just now realizing as I say that I didn't say that at the beginning of the stream like I normally do. So yeah, please go ahead, ask any questions that you've got. You're also more than welcome to reach out to Johnny or I. So if you're not watching us live, if you're watching a recording, you can reach out to us via email or social media or all of the normal things. So if you want to reach out to me, it's very simply Practical Andrew on all of the various platforms. And then andrew.sullivan@redhat.com, or if you prefer to harass Johnny, JRockTX1 on the various platforms, or Johnny, JONNY @redhat.com. So don't be afraid to reach out to us. I know he got a nice short one. I actually I haven't announced it yet, but I have Sully @redhat.com.
That's pretty
there you
good.
go.
Very nice.
Yeah. I don't know. I think when I first joined, 4+ years ago, somebody else had it, but now it's mine, all mine. Anyways,
Yes.
so yeah, please, send in whatever questions you've got. We'll do our best to answer those. That being said, Johnny, I wanted to put you on the spot again. So can you show an example of like, I want to create a config map. I want to apply like some cluster level configuration. Like walk me through that process of going from config map YAML to Argo component and how we actually do that. And Prasanth, please ask your question.
So I'm going to stop sharing this, and then I'm going to share my terminal. Can you see that?
Yeah, looks good.
A little bit bigger would probably not go amiss.
Is that good?
Yeah,
I think so. Sound like my kids on Halloween. What's the most important thing? The biggest, most sugariest candy. Not the taste, not whether or not it's good, just big.
Dude, my daughter only wanted to hit the houses that had full-size candy bars. Like
Wow.
she'd go up and she'd like scope it out, and then she'd give in because she wanted candy anyways. But then like if they had full-size candy bars, she was in a full tilt getting up to the porch. Like, it was pretty funny. So and what's that? I'm sorry.
She's a connoisseur.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So for us, the way that our framework is we just say, hey, look, let me just I'm making this difficult. Yeah, hub's fine. So when we define or we declare our application, we have to tell it, we essentially say where in the repo that resource lives, right? So essentially this common HashiCorp vault or even config demo here, right? It lives in charts/all/config demo, right? So if I go into charts, all config demo, I'm at the base of like a normal Helm template. And so if I go into templates here, I can see that I have all of my resources. So what I would do is I would add a config map here. And I'm just going to copy this config demo. All right, let's see here. So I'm going to copy config demo CM to yeah, let's see here. And so I'm just going to, just to keep it simple, I'm just going to create like, just a config that it's just a config map that's going to be exactly the same as the other one, but it's just going to have my name in it. And I'm going to do a git switch so that way I don't push to main. Oh, I may have messed this up because of my branch. Okay, well, anyways, that's what I would do. So it's context specific. So if I do like a get remote or a get branch, I have my branch set to main. I don't want to push to the main branch up there because I don't want to, that's our public repo. But anyways, what I would do is I would push this in, and then it would just get deployed. So Argo CD would pick up the difference in the file, and it would say, hey, I'm supposed to reconcile this, and then it would start rolling it out. And so if you have things like and Harriet, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think if you have AutoHill set, then what'll happen is if I go into the cluster and I modify that config map or I modify that resource, if AutoHill is set to true, then it'll say, look, there's a difference in that file's config, and it'll puppet it, right? It'll set it back to the normal.
Yeah.
But just generally speaking, if I wanted to add a new file or a new like subscription or whatever, then I would just add the file here, git add, git commit, push it into my repo, and then the controller, the GitOps controller will pick up the difference and then reconcile and push that file out.
Yeah.
And there's a 3-minute like default reconcile loop, so it could take some
you
time.
can just go into the UI and kick off a sync if you need it now.
Exactly. If you're impatient, you just go and force it. Yeah.
And so essentially you're just creating, just like you would, OC apply, or OC create the file. You're creating it, you're adding it to the Git repo. So what does the application definition in Argo look like in order to?
Yeah. So all the,
It's really not a demo if nothing goes wrong.
I know, and it's just slow. So
I see you're familiar with Johnny's demos.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The Bane train. All right. So if I do OC get apps, change it to that project.
While you're tracking that down, we have a really cool feature coming up in the next release of OpenShift GitOps, which is support for server-side apply. So you'll be able to manage way more stuff in OpenShift from GitOps, because you'll be able to do patching, which is very exciting for administrators. I know that we get a lot of requests for like, hey, I like, we do a lot of stuff in GitOps already, but like OpenShift goes and creates a heap of resources and I want to change them. How do we do that in a declarative way? Soon, you'll be able to use server-side apply through Argo CD to just change those little bits that you need to in other resources that aren't owned by Argo CD.
And
That's going to be awesome.
Just to be clear, server-side apply is basically OC apply, right? You're only making the changes that need to be made, not creating a whole new object.
Yeah. So it comes from Kubernetes, the like server-side apply from kube control apply dash server-side, and it will just send the partial object, that the bit that you're opinionated about, and provides the kind of conflict management mechanism of like someone else owns it, but you want to say like, hey, no, I want to claim ownership of that, or actually no, if someone else does own this, I don't want to like overwrite them, and provides you that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. I'm excited. And Harry, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like run off with your. This is your call, right? And I didn't mean to run off doing this demo. So if there's anything that you want me to show or like or walk around, I was just trying to walk through some of the things that could change. But yeah, so Andrew, you see, this is the application resource, and you see like because I've declared this path, anything that I add underneath that path is going to get ingested. So once I create the new file or the new subscription or new whatever it is, right, new deployment. As soon as I push it into Git, and Git is looking at this, or Argo, the controller is looking at this directory, right? And it says, oh, hey, look, there's a new deployment out there. And then it will automatically start that reconciliation to get it out onto the cluster. But I don't have to change anything within the application itself. So the spec of the application doesn't change. I don't modify my Git base. The reason why this is an issue for me to update this is because I don't want to update main off of our public repo. I wasn't expecting to make any changes, which I should. That's on me. Should use my own remote, but yeah, so this it's pretty nice because this gives you the flexibility to add things in, and then you can test things as they're starting to roll out and then pull them out. And you can test if your values, maybe you're declaring some new values and stuff like that. You're testing some logic in your Helm template. It's pretty simple to add these things in, test that stuff out, watch it fail or watch it pass, that type of thing. And then, it's pretty easy. It just makes life pretty simple. And that, like, there's like Helm charts, there's like Git applications, and then there's like Helm charts. And so this is a Git application, and then like a Helm chart would be like a chart that's sitting out in like a public repository somewhere that you can come in, and you essentially add you can overwrite it the same way, where you add some of these values that are specific to your environment, almost like you're doing like a set on the command line for a Helm, Helm install, set this, set that, whatever.
So another dumb question, is there dependencies? Like, can I declare dependencies for things in the same way that we do with operators?
So I don't know, Harriet, if you want to answer that. Like, I have no.
Like you're talking between applications?
Yeah.
Inside Argo? Not yet.
Okay.
It's something that we're looking at because we do have folks ask for it occasionally. And if anyone watching is deadly keen on that, please tell me. I would love to hear about it. If anyone's desperately keen for any like features that we talked about or that you know of, I would also love to hear about that. Always keen to hear from folks.
I'll add in another one. What about like an if statement type thing? Like, if this exists, apply this. Yes,
there's that capability. That's within the Helm sprig stuff, right? So if you are, and let me just kind of show you. So before we move on to that really quick though, the only way that you can do this right now for application dependencies is setting up like sync hooks and sync waves, right? So essentially a sync wave is like that flow in which that sync is going to happen. And then once sync wave 0 or 1 goes, then sync wave 2 will go, and then sync wave 3 and 4 and so on. That's right now the only way that you can actually do the application dependency. In application sets, you'd lose that capability. And I'm quoting like Gerald and Christian here, so I could be quoting it wrong, but once you get into application sets, you kind of lose that flexibility. And so right now there's ways to get around some of those inner application dependencies, either using sync waves and jobs and stuff like that. But it can be a little hokey sometimes, but it works. It definitely works. It's just figuring out all the things that you need to look for before the next thing gets triggered. It makes it a little exciting. And then if we go back, so if I look at just values hub again, and why did I do cat? Mommy. Less imperative. So we see like there's this key here called imperative, right? And so essentially I'm just saying, hey, look, if I have a job that I need to run manually, right? Like I need to actually interact or interrogate my cluster for something, then we create imperative jobs. And this is within our framework. But to go back to your question about using an if statement, I go into common, and I look at the job. If not equal values, okay, so ignore that one. If greater than length equal values cluster group imperative jobs, right? So this is saying if I have a job that's greater, if I actually have something that's defined, then use this. Otherwise, ignore it. So if there's nothing there defined, then it won't create anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, you can use if statements, you can use if else, you can also where you can do like I can't think of the word now, where you're trying to validate like, hey, is this value set to this actual thing, or is this true, or is this false? You know what I mean? Like comparisons. You can do deep comparisons and stuff like that. So
yeah, and Mirak, is it a best practice to install Argo CD inside of an OpenShift cluster?
We certainly recommend it. Our OpenShift GitOps operator is specifically for doing this with OpenShift. Like you can use Argo CD with non-OpenShift clusters. That's much broader than just OpenShift. But for OpenShift clusters, we recommend you use the OpenShift GitOps operator. You get all that extra OpenShift support, the kind of security standards that we set, we adhere to, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and I'll answer that slightly differently. Of if you want to use Argo CD, then yeah, I would say it's a best practice to install. But Argo CD is one way of addressing the problem, if you will, of how do I deploy applications, how do I manage applications, how do I, to your point at the very beginning, right, declaratively and in a controlled manner, manage those, across not just one but multiple clusters. So if your question is, is it a best practice to use Argo CD? The question there is, well, maybe, and it depends on your goals and your requirements and which one of the multitude of tools that's out there best meets your needs. And as Harriet said, we're certainly biased in that if you're using OpenShift and you want to use Argo CD, then yes, certainly you would deploy it into OpenShift. I don't know if can you manage another cluster? Like, can I deploy Argo in one cluster and manage objects in another cluster?
If
yes.
You're great, nice.
Sorry, please. Sorry, I'm my bad.
No,
it goes thought to mouth. I'm sorry. Yeah, please finish your thought. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna start talking about an upcoming feature actually that we've got for managing stuff across namespaces inside a cluster. So that historically hasn't been something that you could do. You had to manage application resources that were inside the control plane cluster. But with the next release of OpenShift GitOps, you'll be able to do those outside of that one namespace inside your one cluster, which is a really awesome step towards a better multi-tenancy story for us. And we're really excited to kind of make some progress in that direction.
Yeah. And Waleed, thank you for joining us while you're driving. We promise we won't be like one of those radio shows that plays sirens or car crash noises. let's see. Sarote. Again, apologies for butchering names. Should we use one Argo CD per cluster, or one Argo CD with application sets to deploy an application across multiple clusters? So I think it's basically a should you have a one-to-one relationship of Argo CD to cluster?
I'm going to be really annoying and say it depends again. It depends on your access requirements. So if you need to divide stuff up by like who needs to use these applications, who needs access to them, by like team or something like that, and you need Argo CD at that level to do your RBAC, then you need to like divvy it up. You have like one Argo per, you can have it per cluster, you can have an Argo per namespace, you can have an Argo per application, as fine-grained as you need it to be. But if it's just like one team managing all of this stuff and they're the only ones who need access, and maybe you don't work in financial services and you don't have like really strict requirements, then one Argo CD can just manage everything and you can do it all in one.
Yeah, I think my first reaction off the top of my head is failure domain. And maybe that's because I've been burnt by that one too many times of, what happens if I have one Argo instance that's deploying and managing, applications across, 2 or 5 or 10 or 50 clusters. What happens if that one Argo instance, goes down? How's that going to affect, operations across? Whereas with multiple Argo instances, you're limiting the failure domain there.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you're managing your Argo with Argo, it's all in Git.
Yeah, that's true. So it would be relatively easy to get everything back up and running, assuming your Git server isn't also affected by whatever disaster strikes.
Then you've got some bigger problems.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we talk about use GitOps or use whatever mechanism to recover all of your OpenShift, your Kubernetes YAML files and all that, and we hand wave over things like persistent data and all of that.
Yeah.
What happens if I need to redeploy all these things and I have gigabytes upon gigabytes of container images that I now have to wait to pull back down? What about my registry? Yeah. So a couple of questions here. So Faradun, rewrite pipeline from GitLab CI. So that's not something I'm terribly familiar with. I would suggest reaching out through Slack. So the Kubernetes Slack has a OpenShift users channel, I guess is what they're called in Slack parlance in there. So Johnny is probably digging for the link right now. That's why I'm not actively going to do that.
I have it.
Yeah. So I would recommend reaching out through there. And it's like 4,000 of our closest friends. There's a great community there. There's lots of people who are asking questions, who are willing to help with kind of all kinds of different aspects. Thank you for posting that, Johnny. So I would recommend going there because Johnny and I are not, at least I'm not savvy on pipelines. Johnny might be. It might be a topic that's worth covering at some point, although it's a little less administery and a little more developer-y, if I'm being honest. Let's see. What is your advice for a junior DevOps engineer? Johnny, I'm gonna throw you under the bus on that one.
Yeah, be a sponge. Learn everything you can. I think, like if you're solid on infrastructure, remain solid on infrastructure, right? And try and just bulk up on the dev stuff, and get used to tools like a GitLab CI or a Tecton CI or GitHub Actions and stuff like that. I think if you get, I think a lot of people struggle with like, well, I'm an infrastructure guy and I don't know how to code, and so it kind of gets in this you kind of get in this analysis loop or paralysis where it's like, I don't know what to do, and so you don't have to be a Python expert and an infrastructure expert to be a DevOps, or a DevOps engineer, right? You need to be able to, read code, and you need to be able to use the tools that are out there, like CI tools and CD tools. And then I always love big picture people. Like when I talk to people, like people that are like narrow focus are great because they're experts in that one thing, but people that can kind of see the whole picture together are, to me, more valuable because that DevOps transition is going to end up you're going to go from a DevOps admin engineer into a SRE, right? And SREs need to be a big picture, need to have that big picture mindset. So that's my advice.
And read the path to GitOps.
And I'm going to share the link
we've just dropped it in.
Awesome.
There's a wonderful ebook by our good friend Christian Hernandez, who I believe is on our Twitch stream at the moment. Lovely overview of everything about GitOps and all the different facets, and it's a really great introduction. So you should definitely check it out. It's free and it's on the developers.redhat.com.
Yep, we know Christian a little bit. Let's see, Chandan is Argo CD CNI development for kind of VXLAN and IP encapsulation in the same cluster. So Argo CD would be independent of that. So it would basically control the configuration. So you would be able to apply config or something like that, but it wouldn't impact whether or not you can use like VXLAN with encapsulation or anything like that. It's a layer on top, if you will, or 2 layers on top. Hopefully I explained that. Johnny, I don't know if you have any clarification there.
No, I think you did it.
Gerald's and Gerald is also one of our GitOps experts. So thank you for joining us and helping in chat today, Gerald. So any other questions that anybody has, please don't hesitate to reach out. As Johnny and I have said many times here on the stream, the interactivity that we get from you, all the questions that we receive both here live while we're on the stream, as well as through email and Slack and all of the other places and things. That's why we're here. That's what we love doing. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have anything. So I say that because we are coming up on the end of our stream. I know Harriet has, it's late in the day for you because you're across the pond, as they say. And also, I think you have something else coming up here in just a couple minutes. So
I do.
We want to make sure that you have time to get to that and maybe enjoy a bite of dinner beforehand. Or supper. No, that's a Southern thing. So yeah, Red Lad, I did meet Christian in real life. Yes, I'm sorry, or congratulations, I guess, depending on your perspective. So thank you so much for joining us, Harriet. We really do appreciate it. This has been enlightening for me. I've said many times that while I know how to hand wave and talk about GitOps at a high level and understand the value prop and all of that, the implementation side is a little bit foreign to me. So thank you for coming on today, helping to explain that. Johnny, appreciate you demoing. So I will hand over to you, Johnny, for any last words.
Harriet, thank you. This was awesome. I was really looking forward to this coming on. Like we've talked before, and like I get super amped up when we start talking about some of the things that are coming out. So I appreciate it, and I apologize if I bogarted, like your call, because this was supposed to be all about you. But no, thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate it. And we appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back when some of the new things start coming out. And kind of walk through it again.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much for having me. It's been lovely.
We won't tell Hillary, so that way she doesn't get jealous.
Exactly. Good call.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much.